Happy Thursday, everybody. I'm Karenna Porter, joined by Jack Veltri. Today, we're going to be previewing South Carolina's opponent this weekend, Oklahoma.
Yep, looking forward to it, Karenna. Hope you're doing well. I know you're on fall break right now, so that's awesome to see. And yeah, this is going to be a really important matchup this weekend for both teams. Obviously, there's the storyline of Shane Beamer making his return to Norman after he was an assistant coach on staff with the Sooners before he became the head coach of the Gamecocks. So then, obviously, these are two teams coming off of losses, and this is almost like a get right type of game. So it should be a really interesting matchup this weekend.
Yeah, I'm super excited to SEC. I'd like to say powerhouses coming off of big losses, and Oklahoma's coming in, I think, pretty defeated after a big Red River rivalry loss. Do you think that's going to serve as a motivator for them?
I definitely think it could, I think, is the better way to put it. And look, Oklahoma, in case you missed it, is coming off a 34-3 loss to number one Texas last week out at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas. And that's always a huge matchup. Oklahoma was actually leading in this game 3-0, and then Texas went on to score 34 unanswered points. So look, this is, I think, a team that the Sooners are very well-rounded defensively, and they're kind of still figuring things out offensively. And that's kind of weird to say because when the Sooners, for as long as we've been watching them, when they were in the Big 12 and stuff before making the jump to the SEC this year, they had always been a very offensive-heavy team, and their defense had been lacking. But specifically this year, it's been under Brett Venables, the former defensive coordinator at Clemson. He has really turned this into a defensive-minded team with an offense that they got playmakers, but some of them are banged up. They're still figuring things out. The big thing with Oklahoma in this game that I noticed is the fact they missed 15 tackles. Like, that's really not a good number to look at. You think about South Carolina with their missed tackles, they had in some of these losses. They were around that same number. So the fact that, look, Oklahoma got blown out, lost by 31 points, I think they're going to be pretty, I would say, fired up going into this game. I don't know about mad, but just definitely want to get the monkey off their back, pick up a win that they desperately need, because I think this is probably Oklahoma's most winnable game the rest of the year, because they're going to have to play Alabama. They're going to go to Ole Miss. You're going to get LSU. So the road from here only gets tougher after this South Carolina game. So if Oklahoma wants to get to a bowl game and have a good year, they have to win this game against South Carolina in Norman.
Mm-hmm. I agree that this is a huge game for either team if they want to make a bowl game. So I think they're both going to be pretty motivated coming into it.
Yeah, no, I definitely would agree, Karenna. And I think for South Carolina, this is a game that, look, you've lost 2 games in a row. You've lost in blowout kind of fashion, really weren't competitive against Ole Miss. And then last week in Tuscaloosa against Alabama, you shocked a lot of people, and you came within a few points of upsetting the Crimson Tide. And I think, look, there's no moral victories here, but I think it's a step in the right direction that you were able to go on the road, massive underdogs, and have a chance in the fourth quarter to win that game. You just couldn't finish it off. So, again, like we said, and like you said, it's going to be a huge game for both teams. I think whoever wins this game, they really are on the better trajectory to making a bowl game. I think Oklahoma will probably make a bowl game either way, but it's not going to be as easy because they have a really tough road ahead. And then South Carolina, you gotta go out of October with a win here. You can't be going into November with another winless October and sitting at 3-4. So definitely a big get right game for both teams, and we'll see who comes out on top. Should be a fun time.
Mm-hmm. I know we said this last week, and I think the Gamecocks did better than I certainly expected, but it's definitely going to be a tough environment for them, especially because they've never played Oklahoma before.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a new type of feel for a new experience, new place. I mean, look, South Carolina and Oklahoma have never played, let alone never played out in Norman. So this will be an interesting type of dynamic because, look, is it going to be like a Big 12 environment, or is it going to have that SEC type feel to it? And it's supposed to be a whiteout. It's going to be Central Time speaking. It's going to be 11:45 kickoff, and for us here on the East Coast, it'll be 12:45. So I think it's either way, it's an early kickoff, and we saw what happened with the Alabama game, with that game being early, and some of the impact it had. Maybe Alabama just wasn't ready to go. Who knows? But I think for South Carolina, they just got to come out and play their best brand of football. And what do I mean by that? Their defense needs to be on point like it has been. You got to be able to start clicking on offense a little bit more than you did last week. I thought last week was good, but it could be better. You just got to set the tone, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. I think if you come into this game and you're falling flat and you're behind the 8 ball early, you're going to be in for a long day, especially against a defense that is arguably just as good as the Gamecocks. But if South Carolina can come out here playing like their hair's on fire, playing really well right out of the gate, I think they're going to be fine, and they'll be able to control the tempo and the crowd factor in this game. Because I can probably say, without knowing what a whiteout is in Norman, I'm sure it'll be a really crazy environment.
I completely agree. Talking on the offense side, we were talking about Lenora Sellers having some excellent, excellent moments, but also some really, really rough moments. That 2 point conversion, for example, was just, I mean, I think maybe he's getting in his head. What do you think the team needs to do to address those struggles?
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you brought the 2 point conversion try, Karenna, because look, that's a play that we can debate it all day, but I think at the same time, it's like you expect him to make that throw, and the fact that the throw wasn't even really close by any means, it's a little bit concerning. But at the same time, this is a guy that has only made 5 career starts now at South Carolina, and he is going to learn from those moments, I think. It's a play that, look, he had a defender coming right at him, and he should probably get the ball out a little quicker, but the fact that the defender was basically hitting him by the time he threw the ball, he just gotten it out. I mean, look, the throw missed Vandrevius Jacobs by a wide margin, and Jacobs was wide open. So it's a learning moment, but also it's not the only mistake made in that game. The fumbles have been a consistent issue for all South Carolina quarterbacks. This is now 2 games in a row where either him or Robbie Ashford have fumbled on a fake handoff to Rocket Sanders. So you can't be having mistakes like that, especially the one in the fourth quarter there against Alabama where you just got the interception in the end zone by O'Donnell Fortune. You're up by 5 points. You have the momentum. And on the first play of the next series, Sellers fumbles. So you cannot be having stuff like that happen. You got to be taking better care of the football. Some of it is going to be on pass protection and the fact that Sellers is getting sacked, and when he's brought to the ground, he's trying to get the ball out of his hands, and that is a whole nother thing on its own. But I think between that and also just Sellers needing to take better care of the football on his own in general, like with the handoffs and stuff, like that sort of stuff should not be happening. So it's got to be cleaned up, and I think he's going to be much better this weekend. Oklahoma is a more kind of tenacious, opportunistic type of defense that's going to be wanting to make plays. And look, they obviously know that South Carolina has some weaknesses on their O-line, and in pass protection, they're going to definitely try to exploit it. But I think given that Sellers is a good runner and he can move around in the pocket and make plays with his legs, as well as, he had a pretty good game last week. He gave South Carolina a legitimate chance to win that game against Alabama, made some great throws. He's just got to do a lot of that again this weekend against a pretty good defense, one that's definitely going to be better than Alabama's. At the same time, got to take care of the football, and in those key moments, make the big plays, because we know he's certainly capable of doing so.
Mm-hmm. And I think while the offense had some struggles last week, Rocket Sanders was looking really, really great. How do you think he's going to be a key piece of maybe the road to victory, maybe just a successful couple drives? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear what you're saying, Karenna. I think that Rocket had a big impact on South Carolina's success last week in Tuscaloosa. And look, the offense, like you said, it's fair to say there were some struggles, because early in that game, you fall behind 14-0, and it's like, oh, here we go again. It's the same thing as Ole Miss. But once you got kind of late into that second quarter, things started to click. After that Mazio Bennett touchdown on 4th and 9 to get on the board for the first time, you really started to play a lot better offensively. And a big part of that, as the game wore on, was Rocket Sanders' ability to be more effective in the run game. 16 carries, 78 yards, a touchdown, had a long rush of 23, and he averaged about 5 yards a carry. So he was looking a lot better. And I think the path to victory, we'll talk about here in a bit, it has to include him. It has to, because this is a team that, look, their offensive identity, I would say, comes through the run game. And it starts with your top portal pickup at running back, which was Rocket. So He's got to have a Rocket Sanders type day. Could you expect maybe 100 yards rushing? That would be ideal. If he can have that type of day, I think you feel very good about your chances of winning. But he also was very good in the receiving game. Like, he caught 4 of his 5 targets, had 25 yards, and I think the running backs in the receiving game are going to play a big part in this type of game where, look, Oscar Attaway had 3 catches for 30 yards, specifically on the shovel pass. That was a big play in that game, and I think when you get Rocket going, it just makes everything so much easier. It makes life easier on Sellers because he knows, like, hey, if I'm not throwing the football great, I have a nice back pocket option when I can hand it off to Rocket and he can do some work. So if South Carolina is going to win this weekend in Norman, it has to be, I don't know about starting with Rocket. I think it starts with Sellers and his play. But right behind him is 1A, 1B. I think it's Sellers and then Rocket. Those two have to be on their A game in this type of atmosphere.
Definitely, definitely. Oklahoma, something that I think might play in South Carolina's favor. Oklahoma's dealing with some really rough injuries right now. How do you think they can overcome that struggle this weekend?
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see who is going to be available for the Sooners because, look, South Carolina's got a share of injuries too. I mean, Jared Brown's been ruled out. DeAndre Jules has been ruled out as well. So they're going to be missing those 2 key guys again this weekend out in Oklahoma. But I think the Sooners have it worse right now because you look at their availability report on the SEC website, they've got 5 receivers that are either out or questionable for this game. The big one being Deion Burks, who is listed as questionable this week. And I do wonder if he's going to play. It sounds like from talking to a few Oklahoma people that he might not play. And he's been Oklahoma's leading receiver so far this year. 26 catches, 201 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, you're essentially relying on a tight end as your next leading pass catcher. It's Bauer Sharp, who's got 21 catches for 180 yards and 1 touchdown. So there's a little bit of a drop off there. If Burks isn't available to go, I wonder who steps up at receiver for Oklahoma. And look, their quarterback, Michael Hawkins, is going to need guys to throw to. I don't think their run game has been great. I don't think their offensive line is that good. If he doesn't have receivers to throw to, I just wonder what can you even expect from Oklahoma's offense. But other than that, I think they're in a pretty good spot. They're going to be down a few DBs. I mean, they'll have a D lineman that's probable right now in David Stone. So I think Oklahoma is really hit hard by the injuries at receiver. But other than that, they seem to be fine all around. Again, this defense for Oklahoma might need to win this game for them. If maybe they need a touchdown or 2 from the defense. I don't know if that's going to happen. But if you can't get much going on offense, you can only count on your defense so much. So it'll be really interesting to see, especially if a guy like Burks is available to play in this game.
All right, Jack, what do you think the road to victory is going to look like for either team this weekend? I can say personally, I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen. I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup to watch. But I think if South Carolina wants to pull out a win, they need to see some good offensive performances, certainly better than what we've seen. But I think that their defense can definitely exploit the issues that Oklahoma's having right now. I mean, the injury bug just kind of bites sometimes, and I think you have to take advantage of that if you want to see a victory for South Carolina.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. You hit the nail on the head there on all those points. And I'll split it up here. For South Carolina, it starts with the turnovers. You have to be able to limit them the best you can, and you can't be having all those fumbles you had last weekend. It's been a constant issue for them, but definitely last week with Alabama being able to recover a few of them and go down and score, that made it more impactful. And so that it starts with the turnovers. After that, you have to be able to continue to do what you've been doing on offense. We saw progress last week. What's the next step? It's obviously taking care of the football, but can Sellers have like a repeat type of performance where he's making these tough throws, he's scrambling when he needs to, but he's not turning the ball over? If that's the case, that might be the best version of Sellers we see, and that's a good thing for South Carolina. And like I alluded to before, I think Rocket Sanders is going to be a huge part of this game. You need him to be able to run the football effectively, kind of like he did last week against Alabama. If he does it even better, I think that just really lends itself well to a potential victory. And then defensively, look, Oklahoma's got a lot of issues on offense. I don't know who's eventually going to be available for them, especially at receiver. It doesn't seem like they're going to have a lot of guys that Michael Hawkins can rely on. If they're able to get something going in the run game, maybe you give Oklahoma a chance here to win. But I feel like South Carolina has a lot less issues on offense compared to the Sooners. And speaking of which, I think I did say before, if Oklahoma is going to win this game, I think it's got to be on the backs of their defense. They got to be able to make plays. I'm not saying like they got to keep South Carolina scoreless in this game, shut out. I don't know if that's reasonable, but I think the talking point all week is the first team that can kind of maybe get to 21 points is where you feel good about, like, hey, like if South Carolina scores 21, I think you feel pretty good about winning this game, because both these offenses, it's probably going to come down to a play or two that, like, if some freak luck thing happens where South Carolina gets burnt on a deep ball and they give up a touchdown there, that might be the difference in the game. And the same deal for Oklahoma. If they can't slow down Sellers or Rocket, whoever it might be a game where South Carolina ends up winning here. So I think it's going to be very close. I'm not sure who is going to win. Haven't really even thought that far yet, but I know for sure I'd be surprised if this were a high-scoring game. I think this is going to be a real gritty type of game.
All right, y'all, thanks for joining us this week. South Carolina is playing Oklahoma at 12:45 Eastern Standard Time on the SEC Network. Jack, you're going to be there this weekend.
Yeah, I will be there. It's going to be my first time going to Oklahoma. I'm flying out on Friday in the afternoon. It should be a good time. And then first time going to Norman, it should be, I wonder what it's going to be like. It's going to be pretty cool, I think, but we'll have to see what happens. And yeah, it'll be a good time, hopefully.
Yeah, it sounds really super fun this weekend. Hopefully it'll be a tight game. I think South Carolina fans and Oklahoma fans will be excited for it.
Yeah, it'll definitely be a good game, hopefully. And again, we hope we're talking about a Gamecock victory next week, or starting next week, I should say. But we'll have to see what happens. It should be a really good game, like you said, Karenna.
All right, for Gamecock Central, I'm Karenna Porter.
I'm Jack Veltri.
Enjoy college football week 8 and stay locked into Gamecock Central.